You looked at that coyote and thought, just passing through. It looked at you and thought something else entirely. It already knew your name. Not the word. The pattern. The exact time you come outside. The sound your back door makes. Whether you brought the dog or not. The coyote you watched disappear into the tree line was not a stranger moving through unfamiliar territory. It was a resident returning to a place it knows in a detail that most people in your neighborhood will never be told about. And what it knows includes you. Most people carry the same mental image of a coyote. A transient animal. A wild thing passing through, belonging nowhere in particular, here today and somewhere else entirely by next week. It is one of the most common assumptions suburban residents make about the wildlife around them. It is also almost never true. And the research that dismantles it reveals something about the animal in your yard that changes the way you understand every encounter you have ever had with one. The part that most people are not prepared for comes in the middle of this, so stay with it all the way through, because the section on sensory memory is the one that tends to stop people. Number 1. The animal you think is passing through has probably been here longer than you have. The distinction wildlife biologists draw between transient and resident coyotes is one of the most important and least communicated facts about suburban coyote populations. A transient coyote is a young animal, typically between 6 and 18 months old, that has dispersed from its natal territory and is moving through unfamiliar landscape looking for a place to establish itself. Transients exist, and they do move through. But they are a minority. GPS tracking data from the Urban Coyote Research Project, which has followed hundreds of individually collared animals across the greater Chicago metropolitan area over more than 2 decades, consistently shows that the majority of coyotes living in suburban residential areas are residents. They have established territories. They have dens. They have home ranges they know with the kind of precision that only comes from months and years of direct experience. The animal that crosses your yard, that pauses at your fence, that you see moving along the edge of your property in the early morning, is in almost every case not a stranger. It is a neighbor. It has been a neighbor for longer than you knew it existed. And in that time, it has been doing something with the information your yard provides every single day that most people never think about until someone tells them. Number 2, what it has memorized about your yard specifically. A resident coyote's relationship to its home range is built on accumulated sensory data organized into what behavioral ecologists describe as a cognitive map. Not a vague sense of familiar territory. A detailed, regularly updated, multi-layered record of the space it inhabits. And your yard is part of that record. Researchers studying spatial cognition in urban carnivores have found that individual coyotes demonstrate route fidelity, returning to the same specific locations, the same fence gaps, the same corners of the same yards, in patterns that suggest not just habit but stored spatial knowledge. The specific entry point in your fence that the coyote uses was not chosen randomly the first time. It was chosen based on something the animal assessed: cover, sight lines, proximity to the next waypoint on its regular circuit. And once chosen, it is remembered, used again, refined. A resident coyote in established suburban territory is not navigating by instinct in the loose sense of the word. It is navigating from memory. Memory of your yard in particular. The shape of it, the cover it offers, the smells it holds, the sounds that come from your house at specific times, all of it stored and all of it used every time the animal moves through the space where you live. Number 3, the sensory memory that goes deeper than most people realize. This is the part worth sitting with. A coyote's olfactory memory, its capacity to store and retrieve information encoded in scent, operates on a timescale and with a specificity that has no real equivalent in human experience. A coyote can detect and identify a scent trail left days or even weeks earlier. It can distinguish between the scent of a dog it has encountered before and a dog it has not. It can identify from scent alone whether a specific person has been in an area recently. In suburban territories where individual coyotes have regular exposure to the same humans over months and years, researchers believe the animals build multisensory profiles of specific individuals that include scent signature, visual pattern, and behavioral expectation. Not your face in the way a crow memorizes a face. Something in some ways more complete than that. Your scent is your most persistent identifier in the landscape. It lingers on the surfaces you touch, on the path you walk, on the air that moves through your yard after you have come and gone. Every time you step outside, you are updating a file the coyote in your territory carries about you. The file has been building since the first time your paths overlapped. In controlled field studies examining coyote responses to human scent trails, researchers found that individual animals responded differently to the scent of a known human versus an unknown one moving through the same territory. A familiar scent signature produced a calibrated, measured response. The territory was behaving as expected. An unfamiliar human scent in a known corridor produced immediate behavioral adjustment, slower movement, increased scent investigation, altered routing. The animal was not just detecting that a human had been there. It was detecting that an unknown human had been there. The distinction between those two responses is the proof of something most people never consider. Your scent is not a generic human signal in the landscape your coyote navigates. It is specifically yours. And it is one of several layers in a sensory file the animal carries about you that grows more complete every time you move through the space you share with it. And unlike a visual memory, which requires the animal to see you, the scent record is continuous. It does not require the coyote to be present when you are. It reads your movements in the data you leave behind. Number 4, the memory that survives seasons and years. This is what most people do not expect when they first understand that the coyote in their yard is a resident rather than a transient. They understand, intellectually, that the animal has a territory it knows. What is harder to absorb is the timescale. A resident coyote in suburban territory can maintain the same home range for years. The Urban Coyote Research Project has tracked individual animals in the same territories for upward of a decade. The same animal, in the same blocks, navigating the same yards, building on a cognitive map that grows more detailed with each passing season. What this means practically is that the coyote moving through your yard this autumn may be working from memories that extend back to encounters it had in that same yard 2 or 3 winters ago. Before you put up the new fence. Before the dog you have now. Possibly before you moved in. A long-term resident coyote knows your neighborhood through a version of time that is entirely different from the one you inhabit. It carries the history of that space in a way no human resident typically does, and it uses that history to inform every decision it makes about when to move, where to go, and how to position itself relative to the humans it shares the landscape with. The neighbor who has been watching your block the longest is almost certainly not a person. Number 5. What it means that it knew you before you knew it existed. Here is the thing that tends to land differently once everything else has settled. At some point, the coyote in your neighborhood identified you. Not the species, not just the category of human, but you specifically as a particular combination of scent, sound, timing, and behavioral pattern that is distinct from the other humans in its territory. It filed that identification. It began using it. By the time you saw it for the first time and thought, just passing through, it had already seen you. Multiple times. It already knew the sound of your car. It already knew what time the light in your kitchen came on. It already knew whether you were the kind of human who comes outside in the dark or the kind who waits for full light. You were not meeting a stranger at that fence. You were being recognized by something that had no reason to introduce itself. The discomfort of that, if you feel it, is pointing you towards something real about the nature of the relationship between suburban humans and the animals that share their space. You have been a known quantity in someone else's territory. The territory you think of as your yard has been part of a map that belongs to something else. And that something else has been memorizing you quietly, patiently, continuously, since before you thought to look. Now you know. And the next time you see it at the edge of your yard, the pause it takes before it moves, that moment of stillness, you will understand what is happening in it. It is not deciding whether to be afraid. It is checking whether what it sees matches what it already knows. Most of the time it will. You have not changed that much since the last time it looked. Tell me in the comments, have you ever realized a coyote had been in your neighborhood longer than you thought? A detail that made you reconsider the timeline? I want to hear about it. I read every one.